Hello, everyone. My name is Tehmina Lodhi. This event aims to bring an awareness through films and discussions on the stigma attached to mental health in our society and educate people of the importance of acknowledging this dire issue on the World Mental Health Day 2021. This specific panel discussion is centered around adverse childhood experiences and the multiple ways it affects people in their adult life. We already know that unhappy experiences in childhood are more likely to lead to mental health issues in later life. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs as they are potentially known, are traumatic events that occur in childhood during the ages of 0 to 17 years old. ACEs don't have a single cause. They can take several different forms, including abuse of any kind, neglect, negative experiences with parents, violence, bullying, racism, the child's sense of safety and stability in the family environment, and even the community itself. Scientists are also now revealing that these stressful childhood experiences have a direct effect on our physical health through their impact on the developing brain and the immune system, with a shortened lifespan and life-threatening diseases. The question now is how to use this knowledge to improve the nation's health. I have with me today three very talented and inspiring colleagues of mine who are working in the field of mental health in Pakistan. And through this discussion, we aim to highlight some important factors that can have its impact in childhood and its effect on mental health in later life as adults. The aim of this discussion is not to give any advice, but merely to bring into awareness some of the key areas where we need to pay attention to our children and their well-being. So thank you, Sana, Nimra, and Aneela, for joining me today. And I really look forward to this discussion in view of your experiences in working in the mental health field in Pakistan. So I'll start off this discussion by asking all of you a very basic question, but one that is very valuable to our discussion today. And maybe Sana, if you can start off by telling me, what are the most common issues brought to you in your therapy room by your clients?
Hi, Tehmina. Thank you for having me. I think one of the things I see most commonly in the therapy room is relationship issues. People struggle with relationships at work, with relationships at home, how to be with their partners. So a lot of relational work is done in the therapy room when it comes to clients. And obviously a lot of that leads to stress and anxiety that clients come in wanting to deal with in the therapy.
Yeah. Aneela, what about you? What are you seeing in your therapy room?
So some of the common issues that I have seen with my clients are anxiety, low self-esteem, low self-worth, suicidal thoughts, self-harm. I've done a lot of boundary work with my clients, false beliefs about themselves. That's something that I work with. And I feel that a lot of these things are stemming from traumatic experiences, neglect, and then challenges in relationships as well. And that's across the board. So family, school, college, work, could be with teachers. So yeah, it could be right across the board in all areas, really.
Nimra, the same question to you, but in a slightly different manner. I want to ask, so how often do you see clients whose presenting issues could be the cause of their adverse childhood experiences?
Hi, Tehmina, and hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is an important question, and actually, I feel like most of the clients that we get, or I get, have something or the other that's got to do with their early childhood experiences. So usually clients present with a lot of different issues like Sana and Aneela spoke about. But once we explore, we get to the core of a sense of self, a sense of esteem that's not healthy enough, where clients feel like they're not good enough, whether that's in their capacity to be in a relationship, where they feel like they're not worthy enough to be loved, or whether that's their general competency in life, where they feel like they're not competent enough, they're not worthy enough, they can't. It affects different aspects of their functionality, which could be relational or which could be education, occupational. it's essentially a client's struggle to connect to parts of themselves that they need in order to be a healthy individual in life, whether that's in personal relationship, that's in work relationships, that's in romantic relationships. So it's something that's actually really common in the therapy room.
Thank you. Thank you. Sana, coming back to you, and let's speak from a more cultural perspective. How do you feel that a child in Pakistan and his upbringing is affected by the joint family system that is prevalent in Pakistan?
So, the joint family system is quite a complicated system, and a child born into that is constantly learning from what is happening around him or her. So the children are learning how to negotiate, how to lay down boundaries, how to resolve conflict, and very importantly, who has agency within that group, how to get agency, what it means to have that agency. And of course, the dynamics of a joint family system play out in a rather complicated manner here. But I always look at the system as something that can potentially have a very transformative and healing power if it is approached with an awareness that it can provide a space, a network, for children to be able to bring in their issues with negative situations like you mentioned, abuse, neglect, even things like bullying at school. If these issues can be discussed in the larger network with a certain amount of validation in terms of how children are feeling about it, without the shame perhaps that is generally attached to issues like this, it really helps. I believe it would really help as when adults deal with these situations, when these children become adults and they deal with these negative situations. It's in a sense the groundwork for talking about it is already laid, because in the therapy room I find that clients struggle to talk about these things because it's always been avoided, or there's been a lot of shame attached to discussing negative situations. And of course, there will be negative situations in life that will come up. So if the family network can be tapped, if individuals or subgroups within the network can help children really come into this situation and talk about themselves, then it could really help them as adults at the personal level, at the professional level, where they can talk about their feelings more openly without the guilt and some of the toxic shame that is attached to talking about issues like this.
Yeah, so right. So well said about shame, and we see that so commonly in the clinical space. Aneela, what would happen like if good enough parenting is not available to a child? What do you think can be the effects of not good enough parenting for a child?
So if good enough parenting is not available to a child, or let's say if a parent or both parents are the perpetrator of the abuse or dysfunction that the child is facing, right? This is where it can get really harmful for a child, right? I feel that if there's even one caretaker or adult available who can provide a safe space, a stable environment for a child, then that child is more likely to come out emotionally and mentally healthy. So when that's not available, right, then the child is more likely to develop, false beliefs about themselves. Like I mentioned earlier, low self-esteem, low self-worth, harmful coping mechanisms, and that can include, eating disorder, self-harm, addiction, and even I would say the development of a false self, which very briefly to kind of explain that would be when a parent is unable to meet the needs of their child, right? Then the child will change themselves in an attempt to have their needs met, right? So essentially the child is changing themselves into who they believe the parent wants them to be, rather than being who they actually are.
Yeah, that's such a sense of loss of one's identity at such a young age. And I guess growing up with that can be so challenging as an adult.
Absolutely.
Nimra, I'd like to ask you, in situations when parents divorce, and it has become quite common in this part of the world as well, how do both parents or even one parent support a child going through this kind of transition?
Yeah, it's really important for parents to be able to support children in this huge change. So I think the first thing to do is to communicate things to a child, to make it very clean, make it very transparent, let the child know that the parents are separating. However, making a distinction between the parents separating as a partner, but still remaining the child's parents, and assuring the child that both parents still love the child the same amount. It's not the child's fault, it's the parents who cannot go on with this relationship. So the family unit is changing. However, it is still a family. Because oftentimes we see that clients come into our therapy rooms and they come from broken families. And because during their childhood, this was not, parents hadn't supported their children through it, these grown-ups have beliefs that perhaps they weren't good enough or that they somehow contributed to their parents splitting. So even in their adult romantic attachments, they enter them thinking that maybe they are too much, or they are difficult, or that they're going to cause difficulties or destruction in someone else's life. Similarly, people go into relationships and they feel like separation is not an option. So we see a lot of grown-ups who are in abusive or toxic romantic relationships because they feel like separating is not an option, or that if they separate, then things are going to be really bad or it's not okay. So it's really important that no matter what happens in a family, the children are taken into confidence and they're spoken through it, and it becomes a collaborative experience where everything is okay and the parents are still the child's parents and their love doesn't change.
Yeah. Sana, coming back to you, I would like to know, how do you deal with the idea of a child wanting to be something or someone who's different from who you might want them to be? A child wants to be something that is maybe not conventional or something that is not accepted in your family. How do you think that parents should deal with, with a child situation like that?
Well, I mean, I think, we all understand and appreciate that every child is unique. Every child brings his or her own strengths and weaknesses into the situation. And I think if parents can acknowledge that, it goes a long way in building that child's sense of self-esteem, sense of self-worth. And, the opposite is when parents are constantly sort of telling children, do this, don't do that, this is right, this is wrong, this you should or shouldn't, all that kind of language, then that critical voice builds up in the child's head. And for the rest of his or her life, that voice is constantly playing back. Oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't, this is not, this, I can't do this. I mean, it actually then becomes his or her own voice. It changes from being the critical parent voice to his or her own voice. And that really leads to a lot of a struggle in terms of work and relationships, and especially in terms of work and what they're doing. Sometimes parents will encourage children to do things that they think is the right thing for them to do based on their experiences. And as we all know, things are changing so quickly in today's world, in today's environment. It's very hard for us to predict the kind of world, the kind of jobs that our children are going to be facing, the kind of stresses and anxieties that they will deal with. And there are a lot of stresses and anxieties out there. It's competitive, it's tough. Social media is always sending these messages at you, right? So if parents can build that positive voice, send positive messages, supportive messages to children, that voice will really go a long way in helping them cope with the stress and anxiety of being an adult in this world.
Yeah, very well said. I think I totally agree with that. The amount of stress and anxiety that children hold nowadays, I guess it's all got to do with all the kind of messages that they have received during their, childhood. And it's really important for parents to recognize that and try to make it easier for their children. Aneela, I'd like to ask you, talking about the parents' own past experiences, how do you think that can impact the way they parent their own children? Because I know a lot of parents come with their own kind of unresolved traumas and unresolved histories. How do you think that can play out in parenting with their own children?
Yeah. So when a parent has their own unprocessed childhood trauma, then in all likelihood, they have developed, all those things that I mentioned before, harmful coping mechanisms, low self-esteem, false beliefs about themselves. So in all likelihood, they have also developed these effects of the trauma, right? And then that carries forward. So it's going to go from their childhood into their adolescence, into their adulthood, and into their parenting as well, right? So an example of this would be, let's say if a parent, when that parent was a child, if they were, let's say, beat in order to kind of comply, right? That parent will likely grow up into an adult who feels that they need to beat their own children in order to make them comply. Right? So when we speak about transgenerational trauma, very briefly, this is kind of how it plays out.
Yeah. And I guess also one of the things that I notice in my own clinical work is how adults, when they were children, had to parent their own children. So, putting that stressor on the children is also so important to recognize that you're not turning your little child into your own parent just because you have unresolved issues. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nimra, now, how do you feel that a parent's relationship with each other affects the children as parents, and how do parents need to kind of separate their own issues, spousal issues, and relationships when parenting? I'd really like you to speak about this because I feel this is a really, really important part of the family and how children need to be separated from the relationship between the mother and father.
Yes, Tehmina, I agree. It's very, very crucial for parents to be able to separate how they are as spouses with how they are as parents. Because for starters, obviously if partners are in a healthy relationship, they're able to be better parents because they're healthier, well-adjusted. But in addition to that, it's the fact that we sometimes forget that our children are always observing us. It's not just about what we teach children verbally and directly, it's also that we're always modeling behavior to our children. So children learn how to be in relationships by observing their parents. And so it's really important for children to be given an example of healthy relationships. And of course, as we know, all relationships have conflicts and issues, but the key is for those to be resolved in a way and also for children to not be impacted. Because as children, it's not a child's responsibility to be able to see the parents' issues or their anger or their resentment towards each other. It has a very negative impact on a child because a child doesn't have the capacity to deal with it. It's like you said, Tehmina, that in our therapy practice, we realized that a lot of grown-ups in their childhood had to parent their children. And one possible reason that we see for that is when parents had a fight, the children were present and they would be exposed to that trauma, that violence, that bitterness, or sometimes they would even have to play the judge. They would have to mediate the situation. So it's really important for parents to be a united front as parents and park aside their own issues and deal with them in private so as to not impact a child's beliefs of world and how to be in a relationship.
Yeah. Sana, coming back to you, I know that you spent quite some time in education with children, and how do you feel that children are given the right amount of independence? What is the right amount of independence? How should it be given to children? What are your views on that?
Gosh, I believe in giving children a lot of independence. I remember in my stint in teaching and in education, I've really encouraged parents to listen to their children, what do they want to do? What are the choices they want to make, as opposed to telling them what they think they should do. And I think the way that works well in the longer term is when you ask children, well, what would you like to do? Even as small as 2 years old, giving them choices like, well, would you rather eat this today or this? Which shoes do you want to wear? Which book should we read tonight? It just empowers them. It's so empowering to say, well, it's my decision. It matters. I can make this decision. It also gives them that responsibility, that sense of thinking things through. Okay, if I choose this, then, this will happen. If I choose that, then this will happen. And that really helps as a scaffolding later in life, because as adults, we're constantly having to make choices and decide on big things. And if we're constantly second guessing ourselves, if that groundwork hasn't been laid, that trust, that sense of being able to think things through, that practice, actually it's practice. Like anything else, decision making is something that also you need to practice to get right. So I feel that could really help adults make better decisions for themselves if they've been allowed to make decisions from a younger age, given that independence of thought, given that trust and faith in themselves. It would go a long way in helping them.
You're right. I feel that an entire society can change if that foundation is laid strongly in our children. Aneela, I wanted to ask you about, how do you feel that if a parent is themselves struggling with, let's say, something like a mental illness, and that's causing like a dysfunction in their own home, how can their child be supported through this? Because I know this is a huge issue, and you can talk about it for hours, but briefly, like, what would you say about somebody as a parent who has a mental health issue and then has children? How would those dynamics work in the family?
Yeah. So when a parent has mental illness, I feel that this can be very confusing for a child. And, I think this is actually really important, because in our society, I feel like there is sometimes this messaging where it is like, this is your parent, just let it go, forget about it, don't take it to heart. And while the intention there may be good, right? Essentially what we're doing is we're not being curious about the child. We're not wondering, how are they actually feeling about this thing that's actually happening, in their life. And in that, I feel like those feelings then kind of begin to bottle up, right? So one way we can help that child is ensuring that they have some kind of open communication somewhere, whether that be another parent, another family member, a therapist, right? A reliable adult, a safe space where they can share those feelings. And those feelings can be so many, it can be confusion, sadness, anger, embarrassment, there can be anxiety, there can be, loads of stuff going on that a child needs to kind of vent out, right? And I think another thing on this is children are very smart. They know when something is off, right? They know when something's not right in their environment. So providing them with age-appropriate information about that mental illness or what is going on exactly in that family, right? Letting them in on it enough so that they can make sense of it. I think that that's very important.
Yeah. We'd be surprised how, children catch on to things. I mean, we think that they don't understand. We think that they don't, they won't know, but they actually do. And it's so important that, like you said, it's such an important point to stress on, that age-appropriate information needs to be given to children.
Yeah.
And Nimra, coming back to you, I wanted to ask you, when, sad situations like when one of the parents dies, how would that be for children? And how does, let's say, a remaining parent who's going through their own grief of losing a spouse, how do they support their children through this? Because this is not just a loss for them, it's an entire loss for the entire family. And with young children, that can cause a huge impact in their lives. So how would a child be supported in this circumstance?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that the surviving parent is not only, like you said, grieving the loss of a spouse, but also have this additional responsibility of helping a child through their grief. And it's a very, very difficult situation. And once again, I say that just have open communication with your child. Let them know that it's okay. It is pain, it is loss, and it's something that the family is in it together. It's not good enough to shun the loss, to not allow the grief. I say that, allow the loss, allow the grief, talk about the feelings, and just create space. And I would say that in this time, seek help, seek therapy. The remaining parent can seek therapy for their own support. There could be therapy for the child. There could be support groups, the community, friends, colleagues, joint family, additional family, because it's a very, very difficult time. And so I would say get all the support that one can, and just, let the child know essentially that it's okay. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel angry, bitter, whatever the stages of grief may be. Just accept it and let it be, and seek support.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'd like to ask each one of the panelists their views on what can be good enough parenting, considering the fact that none of us are perfect and there will always be shortcomings. But what, in your opinion, do you feel can be good enough mothering or parenting? Because we're not just talking about mothers nowadays. I feel that the husbands are equally involved in parenting. So what, in your meaning, would be good enough parenting? Sana, I'll start with you.
Tehmina, I think keeping the lines of communication open is a really important one for me. A lot of times things just get lost because the lines of communication are so closed. Parents are unable to talk to their children, children are unable to talk to their parents. And it's, as Nimra said, seeking help is really important. And I see through my school network that schools have begun to realize this. They're putting counselor teams in place, and they're building the structures that are necessary. But I will say that oftentimes parents will, I'll see parents saying, oh, I'm putting my child into therapy. And I would say that's just kind of half the job. Like parents themselves have so much to process, right? And especially now there's still more of a movement towards therapy and addressing issues in this way. But, some time ago, it wasn't so common. So it's a lot of baggage that parents might be carrying that also needs to be addressed. Teachers, for example, I feel it's such a stressful job. It's such a difficult job. And it's a job where you're really kind of in a position where you can role model so many things for children, So I think that larger groups of people could do with the kind of help that we're talking about today. I think that's important.
Thank you, Sana. Aneela, what, in your opinion, or what do you feel good enough parenting could be for a child?
Yeah, I think here I'll mention kind of a parent's maybe the ability to develop and grow their ability to self-reflect, right? So being able to kind of question yourself, being able to wonder, why am I behaving this way with my child? How did this message that I'm sending my child come to be? Asking yourself more questions so that you can better know yourself, better understand yourself, having kind of processed those traumas that you may have been through, right? So you can then support your child in a more healthy way and guide them in a more healthy way. In addition to that, I think I'll speak towards building a healthy emotional attunement to your child. And here I'm not just talking about verbal communication. In this, it is more so in the subtle gestures. So how we look at our child, how we're holding them, how our tone of voice when we're speaking to them, right? Building this kind of safe and calm space. And like it was mentioned earlier, okay, that's going to be disrupted. Things are going to come and it's going to be disrupted. That calm will be in the day it'll go up and down. But then a parent working on their ability to recreate that, right? Recreate that calm. And in doing that, I feel that a child will then learn that they can also come back. They can begin to mirror that. They can learn how to do that. They can come back to the calm, right? And here, I think that would help in developing also a secure and healthy attachment with the parent when it is recreated and they are able to mirror it, right? And later on, the hope is that they then can do it themselves when the parent is not even there.
Yeah. Yeah, such a beautiful way you put it about attunement. I think that is so important. And attunement doesn't always mean the physical aspect of it. The emotional aspect of attunement is so strong, and that can be such a strong bond between a child and a parent. And then separation doesn't become such a problem. When you are separated, let's say even from your parent, you know that you can always go back, like you said, to that secure base. Yes.
Absolutely.
Nimra, coming to you for the question of good enough parenting, what do you feel, in your opinion, would be a good enough parenting for children?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Sana and Aneela have said. And I also appreciate that this is such a difficult question, because really it's, the biggest responsibility that a person can have. And just to add on, I will say that perhaps a parent can work in how they make a child feel loved. So it's about making your child feel that they're worthy of being loved and simply for existing. They're loved for who they are, sort of separating them from how they act. Because oftentimes we see that parents, as parents, we do want our children to act a certain way, which is understandable and which is great because we're teaching them good behaviors. But at the same time, that's only a part of the child. Who they are, their personality, their uniqueness, their quirks, that's different. So just making a child feel like they're precious, they're valuable, they're a gift, they're a blessing in our life, and letting them know that they deserve to be loved. They're worthy of our love, our care, and our attention, and it's independent from how they act, whether that's their compliance in the home environment, whether that's their academic performance in school, whatever that may be. Just making them feel like, we love them. I think that's simple and very, very important.
Yes, thank you, Nimra, for that. I think that was so well put, that this is such a big responsibility on all of us, actually. Yes. So coming to the end of the session, thank you so much to all of you. I feel this has been a very, very interesting and eye-opening discussion in terms of your experiences. You all have spoken with such honesty and highlighted such major areas of concern. I always believe that no parent purposefully or intentionally wants to hurt their child. But sometimes circumstances are such, or our own traumas are so unresolved that we are unable to see the damage it brings to others. In view of our panel discussion, I would just like to end by saying relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.